You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm just gonna jump right into it. Whenever I start with a death, there's no need to preface. We all know that that's the lead story, and that is the death of Chris Doleman yesterday, who died from a glioblastoma at the age of 58. A glioblastoma is one of, if not the most aggressive form of brain cancer that there is. I want to read some names to you right now. Bruce Smith, Reggie White, Kevin Green, and Julius Peppers. Those are the only 4 players in NFL history to have more sacks than Chris Doleman. He had more sacks than Michael Strahan, Jason Taylor, DeMarcus Ware, Lawrence Taylor, Dwight Freeney, you name it. The 5th most sacks of all time. And it took him, along with Kevin Green, a lot longer than it should have to get into the Hall of Fame. I remember Hall of Faming, and those guys were on the ballot for a while. Was Chris Doleman the most dominant pass rusher of his era? No. He was playing in the same era as Bruce Smith. There is no doubting that for legacy's sake, he just played in the wrong era. If he played a decade earlier, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He spent the first 2 years of his career really looking like a bust. He was playing in the wrong defense for what his style was. He started off as a 3-4 outside linebacker, and he just didn't have the speed to get around the edge like that. That was not his game. He was a power guy. He was not a speed guy. Then in 87, they switched to a 4-3 defense, and Doleman switched over to defensive end, which was his natural position. It was the position that he played better at Pittsburgh. He played both outside linebacker and defensive end at Pittsburgh, but he was better as a defensive end. Actually played with Marino and Jimbo Covert. Those were good Pittsburgh teams. But in 87, he had 11 sacks. And to put that in perspective, he only played 12 games. That was the year where 3 of the Vikings games were played with replacement players, and 1 game was just canceled outright. So 11 sacks in 12 games, when he had only had 3.5 in his first 2 years in the league, and he was playing in every game. You think that he was better off as a 4-3 defensive end? Let me tell you, the best coaches don't have players that fit their system. They have a system that fits their players. And that is what the Vikings had under Jerry Burns. And that year, the Vikings made it to the NFC conference title game, where they lost to the Redskins. But Doleman, in the 87 playoffs, had 3 sacks and a fumble recovery. It wasn't his fault that they couldn't get past Doug Williams. It was just that Wade Wilson wasn't a great quarterback. And that was really the start of his Hall of Fame career. It wasn't the start of his NFL career, but that was the start of the career that landed him in the Hall of Fame. It took him a while to get going, but he eventually got there. He made the Pro Bowl that year, and he made first team All-Pro, first times in his career. 88, another Pro Bowl season, and then 89, he had 21 sacks. His second All-Pro. The only year that he led the NFL in sacks. Think about that for a minute. The guy had 150 and a half sacks in his career. He only led the NFL in sacks once. I'm telling you, he just played in the wrong era. But even getting past that, 21 sacks in a season. That is unreal. Only 4 players in the history of football have had more in a season. Michael Strahan, Jared Allen, Mark Gastineau, and Justin Houston. Reggie White had 21 sacks in the season also, so Doleman tied him. But still, 21 sacks in a year. 1990, 11 sacks in a year. Second team All-Pro. And another Pro Bowl appearance. 91, bad year by his standards. Second most tackles he ever had in a season, but only 7 sacks. But hey, if you're getting 101 tackles, you're doing something right. It was just a bad year by his standards. That's all it was. Jerry Burns was replaced by Dennis Green before the 92 season, and Doleman had 14 and a half sacks. The guy just benefited from coaching changes, evidently. Look, sometimes the message gets stale, and you gotta get a new voice in there. Jerry Burns was a good coach. He wasn't a great coach. The thing with Doleman is his teams were good, but they were never great. Even as we get later in his career, when he played for the Niners, he never played in a Super Bowl. Forget winning it. He never played in one. And he was good in the playoffs too. It wasn't his fault. It was just the teams around him were good, just not great. When you're a defensive player, you need your offense to help get you to the promised land. It's why so many great defenses throughout history have never played in a Super Bowl. The New York Sack Exchange being the obvious example. Doleman was not a Vikings lifer, though. He spent the 94 and 95 seasons in Atlanta, but wasn't himself. He made the Pro Bowl in 95 for the second to last time in his career, but Atlanta wasn't the best fit for him. June Jones wasn't the right coach for him. That's the understatement of the year right there, because June Jones was not a good NFL head coach. 96 to 98, he had his best chances at Super Bowls. He latched on with the 49ers and immediately resurrected his career. Every year that he was with the Niners, he had double-digit sacks. 11 in 96, 12 in 97, his last Pro Bowl year, and 98, he had 15. Now, he was 37 years old at this time, and he had 15 sacks. Unfortunately for him, Steve Young wasn't the Steve Young of old. Jerry Rice wasn't the Jerry Rice of old. They were good teams, but they weren't great teams. He then finished his career with the Vikings in '99. But it took him way too long to get into the Hall of Fame. I don't know exactly how long he had to wait. I just know it took way too long. Of course, the fact that he played alongside such great pass rushers didn't help him. And neither did the fact that he never played in a Super Bowl. But he was a dominant player. He should have been in a long time ago. Fortunately, he got in 2012. And at least he got to see his plaque in Canton before he passed. This is shaping up to be a rough week in deaths. First with Kobe, now with Doleman. It always comes in threes. That's what the saying is. It comes in threes. Let's see who the third one is. Hopefully there isn't a third one, but I'm dreading it. On a happier note, if you're a Red Sox fan, not if you're a Yankee fan like me, but if you're a Red Sox fan, you've got to like that you brought back Mitch Moreland. Really, really reasonable contract for him. I thought he actually could have gotten more in free agency, but, you know, as we grew closer to spring training, you're not going to see the mammoth deals anymore. He's not like a Harper or a Machado where he's going to get a big contract no matter when he signs. The Red Sox needed a first baseman. They didn't want to go into the season with Michael Chavis as their starting first baseman. I think they'll be comfortable with him as their starting second baseman, but not first baseman. You don't want him at first base. Put him at second base. He's much better defensively. Moreland is a guy who will hit 260 for you, probably 20 home runs. It's a good move for the Red Sox. Not a lot of money, which is really saying something considering that they're a team that has spent to the moon. Now they're making a concerted effort to get under the luxury tax. And from the bottom of my heart, please, please, please trade Mookie Betts. Please, please, please get him out of the AL East. Please, please, please gut your roster. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I give you permission to do that. Oh, man. I feel sorry for Chaim Bloom. I really do. He waits a long time to get an opportunity to run a team. And now he gets a mandate from ownership to cut payroll. He's probably going to trade Mookie Betts. And now he's looking for a new manager. Oh, man. I heard they're interested in Mark Kotsay. I don't know how that's going to work. What is with these quality control coaches? What the heck are quality control coaches? Can someone please tell me? I honestly don't know what a quality control coach does for an MLB team. Someone really needs to tell me. Alright, it's time for this day in sports history. I figured this was the right one to do considering Chris Doleman passed, and I wanted to talk about another NFL death. Granted, not one as recent, but still, I figured it flowed. On this day, 18 years ago, Dick Night Train Lane passed away. You've probably heard the name Dick Night Train Lane, but you probably don't know that much about him. It's excusable that you don't. You really should, but he played in the 50s and 60s before the NFL became the juggernaut that it is today. So I'll give you a pass for not knowing about him. This is a guy who had everything stacked against him in life. He was born to a prostitute and her pimp. He was found at the age of just 3 months old in a dumpster covered with newspapers. He was abandoned at birth at the age of 3 months and was put into a dumpster, a human being thrown away like trash. But athletics was his saving grace. He played basketball in high school. He played football in high school. And it was really at football where he shined. Actually, after high school, he signed in the Negro Leagues. He played for a farm team for the Kansas City Monarchs, the Omaha Rockets. He started in the NFL at the age of 24. He didn't play college football. He played 1 year in college football. It was for a very, very small school. I don't even know if it exists anymore. Scottsbluff Junior College. I actually just looked. It does exist. It's just now called Western Nebraska Community College. But still, an incredibly small school. According to Wikipedia, their student body is only 2,400. I can only imagine what it was when he went to school. In 1952, he got a tryout with the Rams and was initially used as a receiver. Fortunately, he was switched to cornerback. In their first scrimmage, he was able to catch up to Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch and tackle him. Now, if you're an older rookie free agent, you gotta make an impact fast. Well, I'm gonna tell you a good way to do that. By tackling one of the fastest men to ever play in the NFL. There's a reason they called him Crazy Legs. I don't know if Tyreek Hill is faster than him, but I'll tell you, I'd have loved to have seen them go toe-to-toe. That single-handedly got him a job right there. And in his rookie season, he had 14 interceptions. A record that still stands. And that's not just for rookies, mind you. That's the all-time record for interceptions in a season. 14. And he set it as a rookie in only 12 games. His dominance is unparalleled. Darrelle Revis at his peak was not as dominant as Dick Night Train Lane. He wasn't the ball hawk that Lane was. Same thing for Richard Sherman, Jalen Ramsey, Deion Sanders, whoever you want. Night Train was better than all of them. Now, the thing with examining stats for a cornerback is, eventually, the quarterbacks figure out not to throw to you. And that's what happened to Lane. 53, he only had 3 interceptions. And he only missed 1 game. Back then, they only played 12 games, so 11 games, 3 interceptions, that's not good. He then went to the Chicago Cardinals and had 10 interceptions. He followed up getting traded with getting 10 interceptions. He also caught a pass and took it 98 yards. I think it was for a touchdown. The second longest pass in NFL history up to that time. Well, no, it probably, depending on how you look at it, it's still the second. I mean, there have been some 99s in there, I think. I mean, you can't get 100, obviously. Whatever it is, 98 yards, still absolutely amazing. This started a run of Pro Bowls for him. That was his first Pro Bowl. He made 7 in his career. And he just racked up the accomplishments after that. 7-time first-team All-Pro. He's been on a bunch of all-time teams, 75th anniversary of the NFL, 100th anniversary of the NFL, and the 1950s All-Decade team. And he deserved every one of those honors. He wasn't just a ball hawk, though. He was a guy who you didn't want anywhere near you. He would tackle you and bring you down so hard your head would spin. You remember Sean Taylor nailing the punter, I think it was Brad Nortman, in the Pro Bowl? Imagine that times 100. Some people today might call his style of tackling dirty. He tackled by the face mask, which you can't do anymore, but back then it was legal. And if it's legal at the time, it's not dirty. He's the reason that the face mask penalty is a thing. He's the reason that clothesline tackles are illegal. The NFL had to change rules because of him. If that doesn't say how dominant you are, I don't know what does. And just an interesting anecdote about him before I move on. When he retired from the NFL, he was a bodyguard for Red Fox. Do you like Sanford and Son? I do. Never hear too much from DeMond Watson? Wilson? I swear, I have no idea what the son's name was. Fred Sanford was obviously Red Fox, but I don't even remember who played his son. Who played Lamont? What was his name? Oh, DeMond Wilson. I just looked it up. I was right. Okay. DeMond Wilson. Man alive. Alright. It's time for another Mount Rushmore. If you've been keeping score, you know what I'm up to. And that is the last of my favorite teams, the Brooklyn Nets. The top three were easy. Julius Erving, Jason Kidd, and Richard Jefferson. You can't argue with that. But after that, it gets tough. Do you go Vince Carter, Brook Lopez, Buck Williams? Do you go to another ABA guy and John Williamson? It's really, really tough. Ultimately, I went with a guy who holds a bunch of records for the Nets, one of the best frontcourt players of his era, and a guy who would get you a double-double every time he stepped onto the floor. And if you still think I'm talking about Brook Lopez, then you're really stupid. The fourth best player in Nets history is Buck Williams. I love his durability. Best player on a bunch of Nets playoff teams. If you wanted to go Vince Carter, I can accept it. I thought about Super John, but at the end of the day, the two ABA title-winning teams, he was not their second best player. Their second best players were probably Billy Paultz and Brian Taylor, respectively. I gotta punish Super John for that. And I just can't go with Brook Lopez, man. I've seen Brook Lopez be the best player on a team. It's not very good. He's a 7-footer who can't rebound. He was infuriating sometimes. I like Brook Lopez. I do have good memories of him. I just can't put him ahead of Buck Williams. And one other thing, Buck Williams, 8 seasons with the Nets. Brook Lopez, 9 seasons with the Nets, and only had 4 more points than him. He got hurt a lot. He missed almost 2 full seasons. I gotta punish him for that. If you wanted to put Vince Carter as your fourth, I can accept it. But the thing is, those teams never made it past the second round. and they should have. Now, granted, not all of that was Carter's fault. The benches of those teams were horrible. I was looking at them the other day, and I only remembered 2 players. Cliff Robinson and Bosjan Nakbar. And even then, all Nakbar was a Steve Novak type, an Anthony Morrow type. He wasn't anything special. I just remember that he was close to automatic from 3. Those were frustrating Nets teams. It's not all Carter's fault, but I do have to ding him for never making it out of the second round. And Buck Williams' teams weren't very successful in the playoffs either, but he made the playoffs 5 times as a Net. That does mean something. Carter's teams, or kids' teams, I should be more accurate, kids' teams with Carter only made the playoffs 3 times. Tomorrow, hopefully there's a happier leading story. I hope it's not another death, man. I hope it doesn't come in 3s or 4s or 5s, whatever. Make this be enough. Please. This is shaping up to be a rough year for deaths, man. I don't like this. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that if you disagree with me, you're wrong.